The Bernie Madoff Ponzi scheme. The largest Ponzi scheme in history didn't hide in the shadows. It operated in plain sight at one of Wall Street's most respected firms, surrounded by investors who felt completely secure. Bernie Madoff's fraud succeeded precisely because it bore none of the hallmarks of a scam. Over decades, he cultivated an impeccable reputation as a market innovator, former NASDAQ chairman, and disciplined investor known for delivering steady, reliable returns, even in volatile markets. His low-key, conservative approach raised few suspicions. Through his separate investment advisory business, Madoff attracted elite clients, major banks, hedge funds, universities, charities, and wealthy individuals, all drawn to the promise of consistent profits with seemingly minimal risk. In reality, no actual trading occurred. Madoff simply used incoming funds from new investors to pay returns to earlier ones, while issuing fabricated account statements to sustain the illusion of legitimate growth. The entire operation relied on unwavering trust and an aura of predictability that Madoff meticulously upheld. For years, auditors never verified the existence of the supposed assets, and regulators ignored repeated warnings, including detailed analyses showing his returns were statistically implausible. The scheme unraveled in 2008 amid the global financial crisis, when panicked investors flooded Madoff with redemption requests he couldn't meet. With no new money flowing in, he confessed to his sons that the firm was one big lie. The fraud's exposure revealed approximately $65 billion in paper losses, the largest financial crime ever documented. Madoff's scandal endures not just for its staggering scale, but for what it exposed: how prestige and reputation can shield even blatant deception from scrutiny, and how systems rooted in trust can conceal fraud for decades. It profoundly altered investor caution, strengthened regulatory oversight, and delivered a sobering truth that promised transparency means little without rigorous, independent verification. The Facebook Meta scandals. Few companies have been credited with bringing the world together and simultaneously accused of tearing it apart as profoundly as Facebook, now Meta. What began in 2004 as a modest college social network quickly evolved into a global juggernaut dominating information flow, political debate, and digital advertising. With that unprecedented scale came a series of escalating crises, each peeling back layers of ethical and operational conflict. Privacy violations marked the earliest major backlash. Revelations showed how loosely guarded user data could be harvested by third parties, most infamously during the 2016 Cambridge Analytica scandal, where millions of profiles were exploited to influence elections. Misinformation and algorithmic harm followed. Leaked internal research, exposed by whistleblower Frances Haugen in 2021, demonstrated that Facebook's own studies had repeatedly identified serious issues. The platform's design amplified divisive and false content to boost engagement, worsened body image problems among teen girls, especially on Instagram, and contributed to political polarization worldwide. Leadership, particularly Mark Zuckerberg, faced criticism for prioritizing growth and time-on-site metrics over user safety and societal well-being. The spread of election interference, conspiracy theories, and dangerous health misinformation during the COVID-19 pandemic further intensified global outrage and regulatory pressure. These controversies highlighted a core challenge: governing a vast information ecosystem driven by engagement algorithms rather than traditional editorial standards. In late 2021, the company rebranded as Meta, redirecting public attention toward ambitious plans for virtual reality and the metaverse. The name change, however, could not resolve the underlying tension: how to pursue aggressive innovation and profitability while managing the real-world consequences of a platform that shapes billions of lives. The Facebook Meta scandals are not isolated incidents, but a recurring pattern, an enduring test of whether a technology built to connect humanity can resist exploiting human attention and vulnerability in the process. Lehman Brothers and the 2008 financial crisis. On September 15, 2008, when Lehman Brothers filed for bankruptcy, it marked far more than the demise of a single firm. It was the instant the global financial system lost faith in itself. Founded in 1850, Lehman had endured the Civil War, the Great Depression, and countless economic upheavals. By the 2000s, it had plunged deeply into mortgage-backed securities, MBS, and related derivatives, intricate instruments created by bundling thousands of home loans into tradable assets. During the housing boom, these securities seemed both safe and lucrative. Banks originated loans, packaged them, earned hefty fees, and borrowed aggressively against their appreciating value. Risk appeared diversified across countless tranches and investors, but in reality, it was merely diffused, not reduced. When U.S. house prices peaked and began declining in 2006 to 2007, defaults surged. The underlying mortgages soured, causing the value of MBS and related products to plummet. Institutions heavily exposed, including Lehman, faced massive, unanticipated losses. Lehman had operated with extreme leverage, sometimes exceeding 30:1, magnifying profits in good times, but leaving no cushion for downturns. As counterparties grew nervous, credit lines vanished overnight. Desperate attempts at rescue, potential sales to Barclays or Bank of America, or government intervention, collapsed, largely because U.S. authorities chose not to extend a bailout as they had for Bear Stearns earlier that year. The filing revealed over $600 billion in liabilities, the largest bankruptcy in American history. The fallout was immediate and global. Credit markets froze. Banks, unsure of one another's solvency, refused to lend even overnight. Money market funds broke the buck, commercial paper markets seized up, and stock markets plunged. The crisis threatened to topple other giants like AIG, Merrill Lynch, and Morgan Stanley, prompting unprecedented government interventions, hundreds of billions in bailouts, central bank liquidity injections, and massive fiscal stimulus. Lehman's collapse became the defining symbol of the Great Recession. It exposed the fragility of a hyper-connected financial system built on layers of opaque innovation, excessive leverage, and unexamined assumptions about perpetual housing growth. More profoundly, it illustrated that modern markets rest not only on capital and regulation, but on trust. When that trust evaporates, even temporarily, venerable institutions can disintegrate in days, and the repercussions can circle the globe. The enduring lesson is sobering. Financial progress without rigorous transparency and prudence is often just fragility in disguise. Brazil's Operation Car Wash, Lava Jato. What began as a routine probe into money laundering at a modest car wash in Brasilia evolved into one of the largest corruption scandals in modern history. Operation Car Wash, or Lava Jato, launched in March 2014 when federal investigators uncovered suspicious transactions at a gas station currency exchange. These modest leads quickly escalated, exposing a vast, institutionalized bribery scheme centered on Petrobras, Brazil's state-owned oil giant. Construction conglomerates systematically overcharged on massive infrastructure contracts, kicking back billions in bribes to Petrobras executives and directors. Those illicit funds were then laundered and channeled into political campaigns, securing favorable policies, continued contracts, and impunity for the network. As prosecutors traced the money trail, the investigation snowballed. Dozens of Brazil's most powerful figures, CEOs of major firms like Odebrecht and OAS, senior politicians across party lines, cabinet ministers, and even former presidents Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva and Michel Temer, were implicated. Hundreds faced charges, with many convicted and sentenced to lengthy prison terms. The operation triggered a national catharsis, dismantling decades-old patterns of political patronage and cronyism while recovering billions in assets. Its reach extended internationally, revealing how Brazilian firms bribed officials across Latin America and beyond to win lucrative public works projects. Yet success bred controversy. Lead Judge Sergio Moro and the Curitiba-based task force faced mounting accusations of procedural overreach, selective targeting, particularly against left-leaning figures, and political bias favoring Lula's rivals. In 2019, leaked private messages, the Vaza Jato disclosures, suggested improper coordination between prosecutors and Moro, compromising judicial impartiality. Many landmark convictions, including Lula's, were later annulled by higher courts on grounds of jurisdictional errors and bias. Moro himself joined Jair Bolsonaro's government as justice minister shortly after sentencing Lula, further fueling perceptions of partisanship. Lava Jato's legacy is deeply ambivalent. It proved that independent institutions could confront entrenched corruption at the highest levels, inspiring anti-graft efforts region-wide. At the same time, its perceived politicization eroded public faith in the judiciary and prosecutors, contributing to institutional distrust and Bolsonaro's 2018 rise. Ultimately, Operation Car Wash reshaped Brazil's political landscape, toppling governments and parties alike. But it also posed an enduring dilemma: how to aggressively root out systemic corruption without compromising the impartiality and trust that justice requires to endure. The Enron Collapse. For 6 straight years, Enron was crowned one of America's most innovative companies. Mere months after its final accolade, it vanished entirely. This jarring contrast captures Enron's essence: a firm lionized for bold ingenuity that was fundamentally a carefully orchestrated facade of deception. Formed in 1985 from the merger of 2 natural gas pipeline companies, Enron reinvented itself in the 1990s as a pioneering energy trader. It touted a revolutionary model, commoditizing electricity and gas like stocks or bonds, earning widespread admiration for its apparent sophistication. In truth, Enron exploited accounting loopholes and off-balance sheet special-purpose entities, SPEs, often controlled by executives like CFO Andrew Fastow, to conceal billions in debt. Reported profits were frequently based on projected future earnings from long-term deals, rather than actual cash flow. Leadership under Chairman Kenneth Lay and CEO Jeffrey Skilling fostered a cutthroat culture prioritizing short-term stock gains and aggressive growth over ethical transparency. Skeptical analysts were sidelined, and employees were fed a relentless narrative of unstoppable success. For years, auditor Arthur Andersen approved the misleading financials, helping sustain the mirage, until falling stock prices, whistleblower concerns, including from VP Sharon Watkins, and investigative reporting triggered intense scrutiny. The house of cards collapsed swiftly. Investors fled once the fabricated earnings were exposed, eroding all confidence. On December 2, 2001, Enron filed for bankruptcy, the largest in U.S. history at the time, with shareholder losses reaching $74 billion over the prior 4 years and thousands of employees devastated by job cuts and wiped out retirement savings heavily tied to company stock. Arthur Andersen, one of the Big Five accounting giants, imploded after conviction for obstructing justice by destroying documents, later overturned, but too late to save the firm. Enron's downfall exposed the perils of unchecked financial innovation, divorced from ethics and rigorous oversight, capable of misleading markets and destroying lives. It spurred landmark reforms, most notably the Sarbanes-Oxley Act of 2002, which mandated stricter corporate governance, executive accountability for financial statements, and independent audit oversight. Yet the deeper insight lingers. Intricate complexity can mask underlying weakness, and widespread acclaim can postpone essential skepticism, often until irreversible damage is done. The FTX Collapse. A cryptocurrency empire once valued at $32 billion disintegrated in under a week, exposing a stark irony at the heart of modern finance. Even in a supposedly decentralized ecosystem governed by code, outcomes still hinge on age-old issues of trust, oversight, and mismanagement. Founded in 2019 by Sam Bankman-Fried, a former Jane Street trader, FTX positioned itself as the mature, transparent gateway to digital assets. Backed by celebrity endorsements, massive venture funding, political donations, and high-profile partnerships, including naming rights for an NBA arena, it rapidly became one of crypto's most prominent exchanges, attracting retail and institutional users alike with promises of safety and innovation. Beneath the polished branding, however, FTX was inseparably entangled with its affiliated trading firm, Alameda Research, also controlled by Bankman-Fried. Customer deposits on the exchange were secretly funneled to Alameda to cover risky bets, trading losses, lavish spending, and speculative ventures. The two entities shared funds, leadership, and infrastructure while maintaining only the illusion of separation and independent governance. The unraveling began in November 2022 when a leaked Alameda balance sheet revealed that a substantial portion of its assets consisted of FTT, the native token issued by FTX itself. This circular arrangement meant Alameda's solvency, and thus FTX's, rested heavily on a thinly traded, self-created asset whose value depended on ongoing confidence in the platform. Once doubts surfaced, fueled by public statements from rival Binance CEO Changpeng Zhao, the fragile house of cards collapsed. A bank-run-style surge of withdrawal requests overwhelmed FTX's liquidity. Unable to honor redemptions, the exchange halted withdrawals, and Bankman-Fried's empire imploded. Bankruptcy proceedings uncovered staggering gaps. Billions in customer funds missing or unaccounted for, reckless loans to executives, abysmal record-keeping, and virtually no meaningful internal controls or audits. The fallout extended far beyond crypto prices. It triggered intense regulatory scrutiny worldwide, eroded faith in decentralized finance's self-regulating claims, and highlighted how unchecked innovation can amplify rather than eliminate traditional financial risks. FTX's spectacular failure did not destroy cryptocurrency, but it compelled a painful industry reckoning. A sector that celebrated its independence from conventional institutions learned a hard truth. True transparency and accountability cannot be guaranteed by blockchain code alone. They require robust governance, ethical leadership, and human oversight that no technology can fully substitute. The Tiger Woods cheating scandal. Tiger Woods had long embodied composure, discipline, and unyielding control, the epitome of athletic perfection. The 2009 scandal that erupted around him demolished that carefully crafted image, laying bare the inherent paradox of modern fame. The more flawless the public persona, the more devastating its exposure as an illusion. In late November 2009, news broke of a bizarre single-car accident outside Woods' Florida home. A Cadillac Escalade crashed into a fire hydrant and tree in the early morning hours. What began as a minor traffic story rapidly escalated when tabloids and mainstream media uncovered allegations of multiple extramarital affairs. The revelations starkly contradicted Woods' meticulously managed brand as a devoted family man and laser-focused champion. His initial refusal to comment only intensified the frenzy. Days later, as more women came forward and evidence mounted, Woods issued a statement admitting to transgressions and personal failings. The fallout was swift and severe. Major sponsors, Accenture, AT&T, Gatorade, and others, dropped or distanced themselves from him, costing hundreds of millions in endorsements. Woods announced an indefinite hiatus from professional golf to focus on family and seek treatment. His marriage to Ellen Nordegren ended in divorce in 2010. Prolonged absences from the sport, compounded by injuries and personal turmoil, eroded his once unassailable dominance. He fell from world number one and endured years without major victories. Yet Woods mounted a remarkable comeback, culminating in his emotionally charged 2019 Masters win, his 15th major title and first in 11 years, widely viewed as one of sport's greatest redemptions. The scandal endures in cultural memory not for its salacious details, but for what it revealed about celebrity in the digital age. Private flaws, once exposed, become inescapable public spectacle. Woods' meticulously marketed aura of invincibility made the fall all the more precipitous. Ultimately, the episode blurred the line between athlete and corporate brand, illustrating how an identity built on perceived perfection carries its own fragility. One misstep can shatter it faster than any record can be set. The Janet Jackson Super Bowl controversy. A single moment during the 2004 Super Bowl halftime show, viewed by nearly 90 million people, forever altered the course of American media regulation and cultural discourse. The performance, featuring Janet Jackson and Justin Timberlake, became infamous not for its artistry, but for the fleeting wardrobe malfunction. Near its conclusion, Timberlake tore away part of Jackson's costume, briefly exposing her breast on live television. The exposure lasted less than a second, yet it ignited a firestorm. CBS, the broadcaster, was inundated with hundreds of thousands of viewer complaints. The Federal Communications Commission, FCC, responded with unprecedented fines totaling over $500,000, later contested and reduced. Networks swiftly adopted mandatory broadcast delays for live events, a policy shift that remains standard today. Beyond indecency debates, the incident sparked a broader reckoning on gender, race, and accountability. Janet Jackson, then at the peak of her career as one of music's most successful artists, suffered severe professional repercussions. Radio stations pulled her songs, music channels blacklisted her videos, major appearances were canceled, and her public image was profoundly damaged. Justin Timberlake, by contrast, faced minimal lasting consequences, continuing his ascent largely unscathed. This stark disparity fueled criticism of double standards. How a black woman bore the overwhelming burden of blame while her white male counterpart escaped relatively unharmed. The controversy exposed deeper contradictions in American society, a culture saturated with sexualized imagery in advertising, music, and entertainment, yet prone to outrage when such imagery appeared unscripted and uncontrolled. Ultimately, the Nipplegate incident endures not for the brief flash itself, but for what it laid bare: entrenched fault lines around morality, race, gender, and media spectacle. A single televised second reshaped industry practices, intensified censorship debates, and highlighted how swiftly public judgment can be weaponized, with consequences that echo far longer than the moment they capture. The Bhopal Gas Tragedy. Bhopal, India, became the site of one of the deadliest industrial disasters in history, laying bare a profound contradiction of modern progress. Technology designed to benefit society can devastate it when safety is sacrificed for profits. On the night of December 2nd to 3rd, 1984, at the Union Carbide India Limited (UCL) pesticide plant, water inadvertently entered tank 610 containing approximately 42 tons of methyl isocyanate, MIC, a highly reactive, toxic intermediate used in car barrel pesticide production. The runaway exothermic reaction generated intense pressure, rupturing safety valves and releasing a massive cloud of MIC gas, along with other chemicals like hydrogen cyanide. The plume drifted silently over densely populated shantytowns and neighborhoods while most residents slept. Within hours, thousands choked to death from pulmonary edema, asphyxiation, and corrosive burns to eyes, lungs, and skin. The official immediate death toll was around 3,800, but independent estimates exceed 8,000 in the first week alone. Over the ensuing weeks and months, the count rose to 20,000 to 30,000, with over 500,000 survivors enduring chronic respiratory diseases, blindness, neurological damage, reproductive issues, and birth defects persisting across generations. The catastrophe was no freak accident but the culmination of systemic failures. Chronic cost-cutting had disabled critical safety systems, refrigeration units off to save energy, flare tower inoperable, water scrubber inadequately pressurized, led to understaffing, poor maintenance, and inadequate worker training. The plant, majority owned by U.S.-based Union Carbide Corporation, UCC, operated with lower safety standards than its American facilities, exacerbating vulnerabilities. UCC blamed sabotage by a disgruntled worker and local mismanagement, but investigations, including by India's Supreme Court and international probes, pinpointed corporate negligence at every level. Legal repercussions dragged on for decades. In 1989, UCC settled with the Indian government for $470 million, a pittance compared to claims exceeding $3 billion, without admitting liability. Criminal charges against UCC CEO Warren Anderson were filed, but evaded through his flight from India. He died unprosecuted in 2014. 8 UCL Indian executives were convicted in 2010 of death by negligence, but received suspended 2-year sentences and minimal fines. Bhopal remains a toxic wasteland, with groundwater contaminated by 1.5 million tons of unremediated waste. Survivors continue protesting for comprehensive cleanup, adequate healthcare, and justice. More than a singular horror, Bhopal symbolizes the perils of unchecked industrialization. Where economic ambition trumps ethical safeguards, the human cost of progress is paid by the vulnerable in developing nations, underscoring the urgent need for global corporate accountability. The Logan Paul Japan scandal. A single video in late 2017 transformed one of YouTube's biggest stars into a global emblem of the internet's ethical boundaries, illustrating how unchecked pursuit of spectacle can obliterate basic human empathy. In December 2017, Logan Paul, then a 22-year-old influencer with tens of millions of subscribers, visited Japan's Aokigahara Forest, a somber location tragically known as a site for suicides. While vlogging with his entourage, the group encountered the body of someone who had recently taken their own life. Rather than halting filming out of respect, Paul continued recording, zooming in on the body and reacting with shock, laughter, and commentary. He later uploaded the footage to his main channel in a video titled, "We Found a Dead Body in the Suicide Forest." The clip garnered millions of views within hours before being deleted amid outrage. The backlash was swift and intense. Viewers, mental health advocates, fellow creators, and Japanese officials condemned the video as profoundly exploitative and insensitive, disrespecting the deceased, grieving families, and cultural norms around death and suicide in Japan. Critics highlighted how it trivialized a serious public health issue for clicks and shock value. YouTube, facing unprecedented pressure, took rare disciplinary action, removing Paul from its Google Preferred ad program, cutting his premium revenue, suspending upcoming projects, and issuing a public statement on responsibility. The platform later strengthened guidelines around harmful content. Paul posted multiple apologies, initially criticized as inadequate, donated to suicide prevention causes, and took a brief hiatus. He eventually returned, pivoting toward philanthropy, boxing, and business ventures like Prime Hydration, largely rebuilding his career. The incident's lasting significance extends beyond one creator's grave error. It exposed the dark incentives of early influencer culture, an algorithm-driven ecosystem that prioritizes virality and engagement above decency, often rewarding outrage and provocation. In the relentless chase for attention, boundaries between entertainment and exploitation blur, and the compulsion to document everything can eclipse reflection, compassion, and restraint. The Logan Paul scandal remains a cautionary milestone, underscoring how digital fame's power amplifies not just reach, but responsibility, and how its absence can turn content creation into callous spectacle. The WorldCom accounting fraud. WorldCom's spectacular 2002 collapse embodied a stark paradox of modern capitalism. A corporation could project immense prosperity not through genuine value creation, but through deliberate fabrication on its books. At its peak in the late 1990s, WorldCom stood as America's second-largest long-distance telecommunications provider, with a market value exceeding $180 billion, a darling of the dot-com-era telecom boom. Within months, it filed the largest bankruptcy in U.S. history at the time, undone not by market forces or rivals, but by simple accounting deceit. Founded in 1983 and aggressively expanded under CEO Bernard Ebbers through dozens of acquisitions, including MCI, WorldCom epitomized 1990s corporate ambition. When revenue growth stalled amid intensifying competition and overcapacity in fiber optics, executives faced unrelenting Wall Street pressure to sustain the illusion of hypergrowth. Rather than report reality, they orchestrated massive fraud. Between 1999 and 2002, roughly $11 billion in ordinary operating expenses, primarily line costs for network access, were improperly capitalized as long-term investments. This accounting sleight of hand artificially inflated profits, preserved earnings per share targets, and propped up the stock price. The scheme unraveled in June 2002 when internal auditor Cynthia Cooper and her team uncovered suspicious entries during a routine review. Their dogged investigation exposed the full extent, triggering SEC probes, board resignations, and swift collapse. The fallout was devastating. WorldCom's restated financials revealed billions in fictitious profits, erasing tens of thousands of jobs, vaporizing employee retirement savings, heavily invested in company stock, and wiping out $180 billion in shareholder value. Ebbers was convicted in 2005 on fraud, conspiracy, and false filing charges, receiving a 25-year sentence, served until his release for health reasons in 2019, He died in 2020. CFO Scott Sullivan cooperated with prosecutors and received 5 years. WorldCom's fraud went beyond one company's malfeasance. It exposed systemic vulnerabilities, how intense pressure for short-term stock performance can incentivize deception, how complex accounting rules can be exploited to obscure rather than illuminate reality, and how investor trust, once shattered, can evaporate overnight. Emerging from bankruptcy as MCI, later acquired by Verizon, the scandal spurred legislative response, including stronger provisions in the Sarbanes-Oxley Act of 2002 for executive accountability and internal controls. WorldCom endures as a cautionary archetype. In markets governed by numbers and logic, belief in sustained growth can be meticulously engineered, and just as meticulously dismantled, revealing the fragile foundation on which financial empires sometimes rest. The FIFA corruption scandal. In 2015, FIFA, the Fédération Internationale de Football Association, governing body of the world's most popular sport, erupted into one of the largest corruption scandals in sports history, exposing how soccer's immense global influence had been quietly manipulated through bribery, power brokering, and secrecy. For decades, FIFA managed billion-dollar tournaments, broadcasting rights, and sponsorships with minimal external accountability. Beneath its facade of international unity and fair play, senior officials allegedly pocketed tens of millions in bribes and kickbacks to influence the awarding of World Cup hosting rights, marketing contracts, and media deals. The scandal broke dramatically in May 2015 when U.S. federal authorities unsealed indictments charging over 40 individuals, including more than a dozen high-ranking FIFA executives, with racketeering, wire fraud, and money laundering spanning 24 years. Parallel Swiss investigations targeted bid rigging and illicit payments. The probes uncovered a web of disguised transactions, consulting fees, offshore accounts, secret meetings, and votes swayed by personal enrichment rather than merit. Particular scrutiny fell on the controversial 2010 decision to award the 2018 World Cup to Russia and the 2022 tournament to Qatar, amid persistent allegations of bot votes and geopolitical favoritism. In a stunning dawn raid, Swiss police arrested 7 FIFA officials at a luxury Zurich hotel during the organization's annual Congress. The arrests triggered resignations, suspensions, and global outrage. Longtime President Sepp Blatter, re-elected days earlier, was not indicted but faced immense pressure. He resigned weeks later, denying personal wrongdoing while admitting systemic failures. Blatter and other top figures, including Michel Platini, were later banned from football governance. The fallout prompted reforms, new ethics committees, term limits for executives, greater financial transparency, and bid process overhauls under Blatter's successor, Gianni Infantino. Yet doubts linger about the depth of change, with critics arguing entrenched cultures of favoritism persist. The FIFA scandal laid bare a profound irony. An institution dedicated to promoting fair play on the pitch had long tolerated foul play off it. Soccer's universal appeal and vast wealth had fostered unchecked power behind closed doors, distorting decisions that shaped the sport worldwide. The beautiful game endured, but the myth of pure, impartial governance at its pinnacle was irreparably shattered. TikTok data privacy investigations. TikTok's meteoric rise from a quirky short video app to a global cultural phenomenon did more than showcase the potency of addictive algorithms. It laid bare the inextricable link between digital dominance and data sovereignty. Owned by Beijing-based ByteDance, TikTok amassed over 1 billion users worldwide in just a few years, reshaping entertainment, trends, and even political discourse. Yet explosive growth invited intense scrutiny over its data practices, particularly fears that vast troves of personal information could be accessed by the Chinese government under national intelligence laws. Regulators in the United States, European Union, India, and elsewhere launched probes into whether TikTok violated privacy statutes or posed national security risks. ByteDance consistently denied wrongdoing, asserting that user data was stored in servers outside China, primarily Singapore and the US, and protected by robust firewalls and independent governance. Evidence complicating these assurances gradually emerged. Internal audits and leaked documents revealed instances of ByteDance employees in China improperly accessing U.S. user data, including location details and private messages of journalists and critics. Former staff described porous boundaries between TikTok's global operations and ByteDance's centralized engineering teams. Governments reacted decisively. Bans on official devices proliferated, covering federal employees in the U.S., EU institutions, Canada, Australia, and others. States and universities followed suit, and India imposed a nationwide prohibition in 2020. In the U.S., congressional hearings grilled CEO Shou Zi Chew in 2023, while legislation like the Restrict Act and later the Protecting Americans from Foreign Adversary-Controlled Applications Act, 2024, threatened forced divestiture unless ByteDance sold TikTok's American operations to non-Chinese owners. Project Texas, an ambitious effort to route U.S. data through Oracle servers under third-party oversight, was presented as a fix, but skeptics argued it couldn't fully sever ties to ByteDance's Beijing headquarters. The TikTok saga transcends any single violation. It marks a pivotal intersection of social media, geopolitics, and surveillance capitalism, where entertainment platforms double as strategic assets in great power competition. More profoundly, it illuminated a transformed digital landscape. The old divides between personal expression and political control, leisure and surveillance, user agency and state reach have dissolved. In this era, billions willingly feed intimate data into apps whose ultimate loyalties remain contested, often realizing the implications only when the geopolitical stakes become impossible to ignore. The Vatican Bank scandal. The Vatican Bank, officially the Institute for the Works of Religion, IWAR, was established to manage church assets for charitable and religious purposes. By the late 20th century, however, it had become embroiled in one of Europe's most intricate financial scandals, intertwining organized crime, political machinations, and the moral credibility of the Catholic Church itself. At the center stood a labyrinth of secret accounts, offshore transactions, and opaque dealings that eroded the line between spiritual mission and temporal power. In the 1970s and 1980s, Archbishop Paul Marcinkus, the IWAR's president, forged close ties with Roberto Calvi, chairman of Banco Ambrosiano and nicknamed God's Banker. The two institutions collaborated extensively, with the Vatican Bank holding shares in Ambrosiano and issuing letters of patronage that implied backing for its debts. When Ambrosiano collapsed in 1982 amid revelations of over $1.3 billion in missing funds, much of it laundered for mafia networks and political bribes, Calvi fled Italy. Days later, he was found hanging beneath Blackfriars Bridge in London, his pockets stuffed with bricks and cash. Officially ruled a suicide, the circumstances fueled persistent theories of murder involving Masonic lodges, the mafia, and Vatican insiders. Investigations exposed how IWAR accounts had been used to funnel illicit funds, including proceeds from corruption and arms deals. Although the Vatican denied direct responsibility, it ultimately contributed around $250 million to settle creditor claims from Ambrosiano's bankruptcy, without admitting liability. The scandal illuminated a deeper conflict. The Holy See's unique status as a sovereign entity allowed its bank to operate with extraordinary secrecy, largely shielded from Italian and international oversight. This opacity, intended to protect ecclesiastical finances, had enabled abuse. Marcinkus himself evaded prosecution under Vatican immunity, but lived under restriction until his death in 2006. The affair profoundly damaged the Church's reputation, symbolizing how even institutions grounded in faith could be tainted by the financial systems they engaged with. In response, successive popes, particularly Benedict XVI and Francis, introduced sweeping reforms, enhanced anti-money laundering controls, external audits, closure of thousands of suspicious accounts, and greater cooperation with international regulators. The IWAR has since pursued transparency to align with global standards. Yet the scandal endures as a cautionary milestone, a stark reminder of how the pursuit of worldly influence can undermine spiritual authority and how secrecy, once justified by sovereignty, can become a veil for human frailty.